Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, everyone lived happily ever after. Sadly, both real life and fairy tales are never quite that simple. Yo, first off, yes, you can see there has been a little bit of a change, but hopefully it won't affect too much. I'm still going to be here trying to make videos, but we've had a bit of a redecorate. Now, the latest show that I struck off my 2020 watch list is actually one that I'm rather late to the party to. Once Upon a Time. Now, this show first aired back in 2011, so for me that would have been kind of mid to late high school, would have been when this show was first coming out for me. Now, and it may have been a show that everyone was talking about, but I don't remember hearing anything about it. But eventually, over time, I saw people were kind of talking about it online, and I thought, yeah, might as well give it a try. So I sat down, bought the first season, sat down, watched it through, and honestly, for the first season, I actually really enjoyed it. This is a show that ran for 7 seasons from 2011 to 2018, and watching the first season through, it's a show I think I could get myself into. Well, yeah, kinda. I do actually feel this is a great show and one that I feel I could spend my time investing in. So, for those who somehow don't know, I mean, apparently this was a phenomenon for a while. You've got a woman named Emma Swan, played by Jennifer Morrison. Now, Jennifer Morrison is one of those actresses that I think you see her in something, and then whenever you see her again, you're like, oh yeah, it's her from that thing. Some people may remember her as Zoe Pearson from her brief time on How I Met Your Mother. I personally remember her a lot from watching House MD for a while, where she played Alison Cameron. But here she is as Emma Swan, a bail bonds collector, kind of like a bounty hunter, living in. Uh, oh god, I've forgotten where she lives in. It may be New York, it may be Chicago. I can't remember. But yeah, she's trying to live her life best way she can when suddenly on her 28th birthday she is met at her apartment by a boy named Henry. A 10-year-old boy named Henry, played by Jared S. Gilmore. And Henry tells her that he is in fact the son she gave up for adoption 10 years ago when she was 18. And the reason why he has come to find her is because she is supposedly the saviour, the great messiah who will save his land. Now, while Emma doesn't necessarily want to marry, she agrees to take him back home to the small town of Storybrooke in Maine, and delivers him back to his adoptive mother Regina, played by Lana Parrilla. However, Henry's ultimate explanation for this is that every single person in the town of Storybrooke is actually a character in the storybook he's got. They're all from fairy tales, and every single person there has forgotten who they are. And while Emma is a bit sceptical about this, he insists that she is actually the daughter of Snow White, and that she is supposed to be this great hero who will come and save the land. Once again, she remains sceptical about it, but gradually over time she begins to see more and more what he's talking about, and how some of the characters do link together, and how they could be seen through the eyes of the fairy tale. His plan his kind of vision insists that Regina, his adopted mother, is actually the evil queen from Snow White. Snow White herself is actually his school teacher named Mary Margaret Blanchard, played by Jennifer Goodwin. Her Prince Charming is actually a coma patient named David, played by Josh Dallas, and his therapist or psychiatrist is actually Jiminy Cricket, who's played by Raphael Sbarge. And honestly, at the start, towards the start of the series, you can just see as like, well, maybe he's using these things as a coping mechanism. Maybe he's in a bad situation, but seeing it through the eyes of fairy tales is the best way. But then, as time goes on, you do become more and more accustomed to his world. And while I said there are the kind of main ones there, you do also get a load of other kind of fairy stories thrown in there. For example, you've got a version of Red Riding Hood named Ruby, played by Megan Ori, her grandmother, played by Beverly Elliott, the seven dwarves. The main one that we focus on is Grumpy, played by Lee Arenberg, who in this world is a guy named Leroy, and even the Magic Mirror is a version played by Giancarlo Esposito, who's in this town is actually the head of the newspaper. Hell, you even get the MCU's Bucky Barnes Sebastian Stan in here as the Mad Hatter. I mean, it to me it does work well for how everything fits together, and each cast member I think does really well. I mean, I think that Jennifer Morrison and Lana Parrilla have brilliant chemistry, and when they have to act opposite each other as these two mothers who are trying to do what's best for their son, even if it means occasionally hurting him, I think they do a wonderful job with that, and it is a series I really started to get invested in. I only have two minor criticisms about Once Upon a Time, and to be honest, one of them is fairly minor, a nitpick really. The other, well, you could argue. The one that I'd argue is a nitpick is that while they do throw in a lot of fairy tales, and you can guess quite a lot of them, we've got Red Riding Hood, Alice in Wonderland, Snow White and the like, there were a few fairy tales I felt were missing and they could have incorporated in well. For example, just going off the fly here, you could have had three rather portly brothers kind of living in Storybrooke and maybe they're running a construction company. I think you can work out what fairy tale I'm referring to there. Maybe you could have also another family that's kind of rather grisly, but they show up at Granny's every morning for a meal of porridge. Or towards the kind of middle and towards the end of the series, first season, at least they introduce a version of Pinocchio. And they kind of, I feel if they did another character like him, only this guy is not into woodwork but is into bakery and baking, well, and maybe give him the fear of dogs, well, you can probably work out what fairy tale that's referring to. So yeah, they do pack in a lot of fairy tales into this story, and they do also bring in other stories later on, such as Robin Hood, Frankenstein and the like. So, yeah. The other thing is that a bit more of a heavy criticism is that while it's aired on ABC, it's clearly Disney. I mean, I know ABC is a subsidiary of Disney, but, I mean, for the first season, it's not so bad. I mean, you've got the likes of Snow White, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood and the like. They're fine. But then I have seen in later seasons they bring in characters such as Mulan, Merida, Anna and Elsa, and you just think, yeah, this is Disney, isn't it? Yeah. Just, I think, especially with Anna and Elsa, considering this would have been going on around the time Frozen was coming out, it's like, yeah, this is clearly made by Disney, isn't it? So, yeah. I mean, I don't mind having Snow White and Cinderella in one show, but when you bring in two other characters who've just become popular with their own film, we'll see how they're done when I get there. But for the first season, I actually really enjoyed Once Upon a Time. Will I get season 2? Well, I hope to do so. Does it join my personal favourites in terms of TV shows? Well, I've still only seen the first season. I can't really make a call on it yet. But, you know what? It's off to a good start for me. I may have missed the show when it was first coming around, but I'm now into it and I'm really enjoying it so far. So, that's my thoughts on Once Upon a Time Season 1. I advise you to check it out if you haven't already. Anyway, I hope to get Season 2 at some point, but until then, off we go.